Zoro Ranch uncovered, Pam Bondi evading her time in court, and more inside of this one because there is a lot of news this week relating to the Epstein files, and we're gonna dive into all of them.
On April 16th, the United Nations, not a blogger, not a podcast host, the actual United Nations, released an official statement about the Epstein case. And what they said was not careful diplomatic language. It was some of the harshest language that exists in international law. UN human rights experts, specifically a special rapporteur on trafficking in persons, along with a working group focused on discrimination against women and girls, came out and described the Epstein network as a possible global criminal enterprise. They said, there is disturbing and credible evidence of systematic sexual abuse and trafficking of women and girls involving senior politicians, diplomats, global business leaders, and leading academics.
These are basically who we call the elites, and you could also throw in there really successful Hollywood actors, actresses, musicians, etc.
According to the UN Human Rights Council, the allegations in the Epstein files amount to what? Crimes against humanity. And they must be investigated, and they must be persecuted in national and international court. Oh my God. This is Gia just said that. How long have we been saying? United Nations International Court. Crimes against humanity.
They listed the crimes they believe took place: sexual slavery, reproductive violence, enforced disappearance, torture, and femicide.
Why couldn't it have been the United States to do this? Why do we have to wait for other countries to do this type of thing? And us, we're sitting here looking like fools. I mean, let's be honest here. The reason is because there's so many Americans that are implicated in this, but I digress.
And they said the patterns may legally meet the threshold for crimes against humanity. The UN experts also said something that should be said louder. Any suggestion that it is time to move on from the Epstein files is unacceptable.
Yes.
They called on the US to release everything. They called on other countries to investigate any officials named in those files within their own borders.
I love that they said that it's unacceptable to move on. Now, we have heard people say, let's move on from the Epstein files. Let's put it behind us. There's nothing to see here. Why are they saying that? It's because they don't want it investigated. But now, at least it's being called on that is not acceptable. And I think most of America would agree.
Here is the thing that matters most about this story. The U.S. Department of Justice already said publicly that they are done releasing files.
Wow.
The UN just said that is not acceptable. So now you've got international human rights authorities directly calling out American inaction. And so far, silence from Washington.
Why silence from Washington? Because they don't want the Epstein files to be released. This is no secret. It is obvious to all of us. It's corrupt.
While this is happening in the US, the UK is dealing with its own Epstein fallout, and it's moving fast. Peter Mandelson, who was appointed UK ambassador to the United States by Prime Minister Keir Starmer in 2024, is a known friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He was arrested back in February 2026 for allegedly passing government secrets to Epstein. Now, you'd think the question of how this person ever got appointed in the first place would have been asked a long time ago, and it turns out someone did ask. The security vetting agency recommended denying Mandelson clearance before his appointment, specifically because of his Epstein ties. Foreign Office officials overruled that recommendation and approved him anyway. On April 17th, that story became public.
It's going to distract me from delivering for our country.
Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and go?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. Before Mandelson took up his post, UKSB recommended with red flags that clearance should be denied, and there was high concern that was not brought to my attention or the attention of the Foreign Secretary at the time or subsequently is a very serious error of judgment.
Starmer's response? He said he only found out about the failed vetting last week, meaning mid-April 2026. Opposition leaders called that claim completely preposterous. Documents show that Starmer was warned of reputational risks before he ever made the appointment. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch put it plainly. Starmer is either lying or grossly incompetent. Those are not good options. Then, on April 18th, the top civil servant inside the Foreign Office, a man named Ollie Robbins, resigned, or was pushed out. Down Downing Street briefed the media that Robbins had failed to keep Starmer informed about the vetting issues. 3 days later, on April 21st, Robbins testified before Parliament, and what he said painted a very different picture. He said there was an atmosphere of pressure from Starmer's office to rush Mandelson's appointment through, that there was a very, very strong expectation that Mandelson needed to be in Washington quickly for Trump's inauguration. He described Downing Street's attitude toward the vetting concerns as generally dismissive.
Misled Parliament, Prime Minister! Will you resign, Mr. Starmer? Is this the beginning of the end, Prime Minister? Will this scandal sink your premiership? Why did you ignore vetting advice, Prime Minister?
He's being asked.
That same day, April 21st, Starmer stood up in Parliament and said the words, "I should not have appointed Peter Mandelson," but he refused to resign.
Should not have appointed Peter Mandelson. I take responsibility for that decision, and I apologise again to the victims of the pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, who were clearly failed by my decision.
Hey, at least he's saying that. Now, obviously, that was a speech potentially written for him, but at least he's going out and saying it.
The reason this matters beyond UK politics is simple. Local elections are on May 7th. Labour is expected to get crushed, and if those results are bad enough, Starmer's own MPs could force him out because of one Epstein-connected appointment. That is how far the ripple from this case is reaching right now. Story 3. Pam Bondi goes silent.
This is a good one because if you think about it, Pam Bondi was fired just about a week or so ago, and she was said to be in court to testify and to be questioned regarding the Epstein files. She was pulled in on this when she was still in office, but now that she's not anymore, I guess she felt that she didn't have to go. This is actually crazy, and I can't believe that she's actually getting away with this.
Back in the US, the person who was legally required to show up and answer questions about the Epstein cover-up just didn't come.
Yeah.
Congress subpoenaed Pam Bondi to appear for a sworn deposition on April 14th. The subpoena was bipartisan. Both Republicans and Democrats voted for it. The whole point was to get answers about why half of the Epstein files are still not public, and why victims' names ended up in documents that were supposed to be redacted, putting survivors in danger. April 14th came. Pam Bondi did not show up. The DOJ tried to argue that because Bondi was no longer Attorney General, the subpoena wasn't valid anymore. There's one problem with that argument. The subpoena was for Pam Bondi, the person, not for the office. Ranking Member Robert Garcia was very clear about this. He said, "The subpoena is for Pam Bondi. Whether she holds the position or not, she is legally required to appear."
Since she didn't appear, what is the consequence of this? Shouldn't there be a consequence for not attending the court when she was called on by the court? And where the heck is she right now? Is she out in hiding, trying to dig her head in the sand because of all the crimes that she's committed?
Both Democrats and Republicans on the committee confirmed they are now contacting Bondi's personal lawyer to schedule the deposition. Not cancel it, schedule it. A contempt charge is coming, and even some Republican members are on board with enforcing it.
The question is, let's say they schedule it. And Pam Bondi has all the answers. She's seen all the files. She knows everything inside of her head. Are people going to be scared that she's going to talk? And if people are scared that she's going to speak in her deposition, is she actually safe? Or does she need to be concerned that she may not be around to actually make it to court? We've seen crazier things happen in this case.
Republican Nancy Mace, along with another member, sent a letter to the committee chair just weeks before this saying, and I'm quoting here, "The removal of Pam Bondi as Attorney General does not diminish the committee's legitimate oversight interest in seeking her sworn testimony," which is a very official way of saying she cannot just disappear. Even her own party said that. And the reason the contempt charge matters? Because even if Trump's DOJ refuses to prosecute her now, the next administration's DOJ won't have that same protection. The people who decided the law didn't apply to them have a clock running. They just can't see it yet.
Sworn testimony. Pam Bondi. Does that even matter? Can we trust that any of these people would go in front of a court, go in front of a judge, and tell the truth? They've been lying and covering things up for so long. Why do we suddenly believe that a sworn testimony is actually going to hold water? I personally don't. Very curious about you watching. Do you think that her testimony will be truthful in any sense?
Story 4, Zoro Ranch, the property nobody wanted to search.
Now, this is cool because I just recorded a video about the Zoro Ranch. You guys asked for it in my poll that I put up on my page, and you said that you wanted to know more about the properties. Yeah, I definitely do listen to you guys and try and make videos about things that you want to see. Well, I went in depth on this ranch, and it's about to be summarized here. Make sure you don't miss that video, because not only does it give you guys a deep look at the ranch, but also a deep look inside of the mind of one of Epstein's biggest victims. It's actually a great video.
Of all the properties Jeffrey Epstein owned, the Manhattan Mansion, the Palm Beach Estate, the private island in the Caribbean, the one that got almost zero federal attention in 2019 was also the biggest, Zoro Ranch. 7,500 acres in New Mexico, plus another 1,200 he leased from the state. He bought it in 1993 from the state's own former governor off a back road between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. When Epstein was arrested in 2019, federal investigators went through his other properties. They did not go to Zoro Ranch.
Why? Why wouldn't they go to the ranch, yet they would go to the other properties where there were over 9,000 acres of literal desert where anything could be?
Their stated reason was that they had no probable cause to search it. Meanwhile, the New Mexico Attorney General at the time, Hector Balderas, had opened his own state investigation. But the federal prosecutors in New York told him to stop talking to witnesses, saying they didn't want duplicate testimony that could hurt their case.
And there was actually fact that there were things said about, how do I say this? Things being hidden on the ranch, things that would definitely require an investigation. But the DOJ, the FBI, didn't want anyone to go investigate that.
Balderas said that seemed reasonable at first. The problem was what came after. Those federal prosecutors went completely dark. They stopped sharing information. They never gave New Mexico the evidence that would have helped bring state charges. Balderas only found out how deep the Zoro Ranch story went when the DOJ started releasing files in 2026, years later. Every lawmaker and investigator who's looked at this has the same question. You searched his house in Manhattan, you searched Florida, you searched the island, but not the biggest property he owned? Why? There's also an anonymous tip that was reported to the FBI back in 2019, claiming 2 women may have been buried on the property.
Correct.
The radio host who filed that tip said he never heard from the FBI again after reporting it. The FBI has declined to comment on that tip. The DOJ has also declined to comment. In March 2026, years after the fact, the current New Mexico Attorney General finally searched the property. The new owner, a Texas real estate developer who bought it in 2023...
Who buys that property? I mean, he's a real estate developer. I guess he could turn it into whatever he wants, but with the Epstein files and everyone knowing what went down there, who would in their right mind want to live there? I know if he were to develop that land, turn it into an amazing estates for people, even priced nicely, would you want to live in a place where all these terrible crimes happened? I guess some people would. I wouldn't want to be one of them. I'll move somewhere else.
Cooperated voluntarily. No physical evidence of criminal activity has been reported found, but investigators say they still haven't received the full investigative file back from the federal government, files that New Mexico handed over to the feds years ago and has been trying to get back ever since. The former governor who sold Epstein the ranch, Bill Richardson, is referenced hundreds of times in the Epstein files. Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers, says Epstein trafficked her to Richardson. Richardson denied it completely before his death in 2023. The unredacted files that could answer that question are still sitting with the DOJ, not shared with New Mexico, not shared with the public. Survivors who were brought to that property have said it was like the gates of hell, and investigators who've reviewed the evidence say they've never seen anything to that extent.
I don't think there's any reason why any of the survivors would make up names and give false accusations of people that commit crimes against them. Why would they want to make up and falsify claims about in particular people? It seems that they'd only want to make claims against people that actually did things to them, unless if their minds were completely blown, which I guess is a possibility. I tend to lean towards believing the things that the survivors are saying.
Years later, that property still doesn't have its full story told, and that's on purpose. Two more stories you need to know from this week. First, on April 21st, the Gates Foundation announced it had opened an external review earlier this year into its connections to Epstein. The DOJ's file release in January 2026 showed direct communication between Epstein and Gates Foundation staff. Foundation CEO Mark Sussman said the review was opened to look at past engagement with Epstein and to assess the foundation's current policies for vetting new partners. Bill Gates has been under scrutiny over his Epstein ties for years. The foundation is now publicly acknowledging it needs to look at what actually happened. Second, and this one really needs more attention than it's getting, multiple Epstein victims have come forward to say the Justice Department failed to properly investigate their claims against other men. Not just Epstein, not just Ghislaine Maxwell, other men. They named names, they gave accounts, and despite multiple survivors naming additional powerful people as abusers, no criminal charges have come from any of those allegations. Which raises the question investigators, lawmakers, and the victims themselves are now asking out loud. Did the DOJ deliberately keep the investigation small? Did they draw a box around Epstein and Maxwell and decide the line stopped there, even when survivors were pointing beyond it? 3 million pages of evidence, 0 new arrests. That number doesn't get easier to sit with the more you learn about what's in those files.
It's quite a bit of news that came through this week, and things are happening with the Epstein files. They did say that at Zoro Ranch they checked it out, but there's no talk about anything that they found. Maybe they found nothing. We just don't know. Pam Bondi, that is a story in itself. Let me know if you want to see more of these roundup type videos in the future. And if you want to know more, maybe about some people that were exposed inside of the Epstein files or about someone in Hollywood that exposed them, check out this video because I think you'll enjoy it. And I'll see you guys over there.